economy is not resilient to the climate shocks, where do you think those folks are going to? Obviously, at some point, they may migrate up north. So it's not just a climate story, it's not just an economic story, it's a migration story.
How is that landing with the leaders that are here? I mean, we had a up at the top because that turns the whole thing on its head in some ways.
Exactly. So basically, my central message is you're missing the point, right? If you just ignore adaptation finance, because adaptation finance is about jobs, is about growth, is about health, is about economic prosperity. You cannot, well, you can build new highways and airports and what have you, but if they're being washed away by the upcoming floods, it's not really a smart development, so to say, right? So you need this resilient development, and that unlocks the jobs for the future.
How do you think that's going? I mean, you've got a couple of weeks here. Do you think there'll be sufficient in the end result of whatever kind of a deal or not deal we get here that will send that kind of signal to the markets and will say, actually, you know what, we're really taking adaptation seriously now. We're putting more money into it. We're hearing the argument.
The wind is at our back, but at the same time, the agenda, but the emissions and the temperature is also accelerating. Are we catching up in that sprint? And that is the question. At the moment, we're not, right? I mean, the climate impacts are escalating. The climate adaptation agenda is progressing, but not fast enough and not at the scale enough. That is the litmus test for Belém.
So that was Matt McGrath there in Belém. Well, one of the questions that we're interested in is what role Africa can see for itself to play at the summit and beyond. Well, I've been speaking to Wanjiro Wangai, who is the Managing Director for Africa and Global Partnerships at the World Resources Institute and Chair of the Wangari Maathai Foundation.
Well, certainly at the moment, we know that extreme events, weather events, climate events, are intensifying. We know that emissions and ambition on emissions reduction are not going in the direction that we had hoped. But we are reminded daily of the extreme events and the damage it's causing. So for us in Africa, building lasting resilience has got to be the number one priority at the moment. That means investing in green, climate resilient infrastructure, investing in entrepreneurship that will allow people to have money in their pockets and build and make the choices of where they live, how they live. Because it's going to be difficult, and poverty as the number one driver of vulnerability has got to be the focus of our work in addition to reducing global emissions.
You write about wanting this conference to deliver climate justice. What does that look like for you, for the African continent?
Well, on a few levels. One is stepping up on finance and finance for adaptation, ensuring that adaptation finance is clear in the form of grants and that countries are able to build the basis for resilience that they need. Remember that for most African countries, they are already spending upwards of 15% of their GDP on adaptation following storms. Imagine a country like Jamaica and what just happened and what's going on right now in the Philippines. So making sure that they have the finance they need to build back smarter and faster has got to be a global priority.
You will know, of course, that there are competing priorities for many governments across the African continent. Food insecurity, conflicts also causing issues. So how can authorities tackle all of these things at once?
Well, you know, for many of our countries, we do not have a choice. But we also know that these are not isolated issues. We know that conflicts will ensue when resources, natural resources, are scarce. And so we have to make sure that we build resilient food systems, that we are investing in food systems locally, reclaiming agricultural land and using regenerative farming methods so that we can increase our production and the land that's used for production. We also know, especially for Africa, there's so many nutritious foods that we've turned our back on. They're called orphaned foods and orphaned crops. A lot of those are climate resilient. A lot of those are very place specific. It's reintroducing some of these so that our children and the country as a whole is building a breadbasket based on foods that they have and not depending on supply chains that are so far away.
A lot of what you're describing relies on a high level of cooperation beyond the African continent as well. I speak to you as the daughter of the Nobel Peace Laureate, your mum, recognised for her work on the climate. I wonder what she would make of some of the conversations around climate change at the moment. You have Donald Trump, leader of the world's biggest economy, describing it as a con job, and you have politics in other countries kind of trying to move away from green industries, saying that it's not good for the economy. What would she say?
Listen, I know she would remind us that even with those voices, the reality on the ground is quite different. In the last year, solar and wind were the number one sources of energy globally. We are seeing costs of energy from renewable sources cheaper for the very first time than energy from dirty sources. The transition is happening regardless of what the naysayers are saying. So she would want us to lean into the transformation and the transition that is happening anyway. A green, climate resilient Africa is before us. It's happening. And we need to stay focused and build on that, because actually that's the comparative advantage we have. We have an abundance of renewable energy. We have an abundance of a workforce that is young and entrepreneurial. And of course, we have an abundance of resources that we should be trading smarter with. So we should not be deceived that one or two voices are carrying the day.
But there is a cost that comes with the transition to get to the point that you're hoping for.
Well, they will always cost money, but in many ways they are disruptive innovations. They're cheaper and better.
So what is your message then to richer nations, if you like, the countries that are the bigger emitters of fuels that can contribute to climate change? What is your message to them over the course of COP?
Well, they've made a commitment to reduce their emissions, and those need to be taken seriously. Commitments made must be kept, and so their national determined contributions, the trajectories to reduce fossil fuel emissions have to be met, and that pressure is important, and that's why we're here, because the climate diplomatic agenda remains extremely important. Global emissions have to go down if we're going to save ourselves. It's not about saving the planet, it's about saving humanity as we know it. Then we also have to remember the injustice in climate. Those who have emitted and historically been responsible for the changes we're seeing have got to pay for the damage that has been caused. And those commitments have also been made. And these are countries that have made negotiated agreements to invest in resilience. And then there is the other reality that to me is the most inspiring, that Africa's green climate opportunities are an opportunity not only for the continent, but for the rest of the world. There's an investment to be made in Africa's green grid. That we have a country like Kenya with 90% of renewable energy in the grid is an opportunity to manufacture greener, and to see that we do not manufacture goods in places where the energy or the resources used are polluting. We have to continue to put pressure on each other as a global family, because none of this can be done one country at a time.
Speaking to me earlier, that was Wanjira Wangai, who is from the chair of the Wangari Maathai Foundation.
Well, Somalia is facing a growing hunger crisis, with nearly half of all children under 5 at risk of acute malnutrition by the middle of next year, according to the charity Save the Children. Rising food prices, climate disasters and ongoing conflict are pushing families to the brink, but aid cuts are apparently making the situation even worse. The BBC's Faradosa Hanshi went to a health centre that serves one of the largest camps for internally displaced people and sent this report.
I am at Smino Health Center in Bosaso, northern Somalia. Mothers with their children arrive here to receive much needed care. Inside the center, Nesra Noor places her daughter on a makeshift weighing scale. The doctor examines her vitals. For years, she has relied on this facility for food supplements and medicine.
I'm raising these children alone, many malnourished. Without this center, we don't know how we will survive. Even getting basic needs is a daily struggle.
Another desperate mother, Fardosa Hassan, arrives here from one of the 16 nearby IDP camps.
Honestly, we are surviving on biscuits. If they run out, we have nothing left. We can't afford nutritious food, even simple things like milk or vitamins. Our children are weak and it breaks my heart.
Somalia has been here before. For more than a decade, the country has been trapped in a cycle of drought, conflict, and displacement, each wave leaving families more vulnerable than the last.
You have children under 5?
International NGO Save the Children, which runs this facility, has projected that nearly half of Somalia's children under 5 could face malnourishment by June next year. Their spokesperson, Dr. B.M. Gebru, told me the operations across the country had already taken a hit.
We have closed around 124 mobile and fixed facilities by now. So if you don't have additional supplies, we are likely to close over 200 facilities plus mobile units across Somalia.
Not too far from the health center, I'll visit a government-run stabilization center. This is where acute malnourished children come for long-term care and recovery. I see empty shelves, a few dozen cartons of baby formula, packets of nutritional biscuits, and beds, each with a mother and her child. Dr. Hassan Abdurrashid is the hospital director.
Most of the children here don't get enough food. They don't get medicines and they don't get other types of support. The only thing we can provide is milk. What is worse, we have also faced staff reductions which are making it impossible to run the hospital.
Local health officials say they are reaching a breaking point. With dwindling supplies and reduced donor funding, they warn the situation is becoming impossible to manage. Farhia Osman, a Ministry of Health official, echoes the concern.
As the Ministry of Health, we are doing our best. But the humanitarian agencies that used to support our services have dropped sharply, and resources are no longer available.
In just a few months, the aid that keeps facilities like the Senior Health Center operational could be cut off, and it's mothers like Nasra and Ferdosa who will feel the force of the impact.
That was the BBC's Faraday Sahanji there, reporting from Somalia.
You're listening to Newsday from the BBC World Service with Rob, Priya, and with our sports, it's Sarah Manai.
Good morning. In men's football, we are at the start of an international break. Players have joined their national teams for World Cup qualifiers and friendly matches. And on Thursday, 4 contenders will be reduced to 1 in African playoffs for the FIFA World Cup, the next one, 2026. After missing out on the continent's 9 automatic qualification spots, Cameroon, DR Congo, Gabon and Nigeria are the 4 who've made it through to the African playoffs. Now, depending on their world ranking, the victorious nations faces 1 or 2 more matches in order to reach next year's tournament in Canada, Mexico and the United States. It's also a Champions League week in the women's game. 4 matches are scheduled tonight starting from 5:45 GMT. Roma will face the Norwegian club of Vålerenga, Lyon will face Wolfsburg, Real Madrid will host Paris FC and Chelsea are travelling to the Austrian city of St. Pölten. Now in tennis and the season-ending ATP Finals in Turin, Italy, where the home favourite Yannick Sinner has started the defence of his title with a straight sets win, 7-5, 6-1 over Felix Auger-Aliassime of Canada, who appeared to be a little hampered by injury despite carrying on in the match against Sinner. Sinner returned to number 1 in the world earlier this month, beating Aliassime in the final of the Paris Masters already. Sinner needs to retain now his title in Turin without losing a match if he wants to finish the season as number 1. He has to hope as well that Carlos Alcaraz slips up. But for now, the Wimbledon champion is pleased with how it started for him.
He's one of the toughest players to beat. They're not 6'5" precise,
So,
struggling physically, and you
but
want to win obviously in this way, but in the other way.
we've taken our cocoa, we've taken our breakfast while listening to BBC. Okay, guys, I'll catch you again.